again. The junior doctors are on strike this time, though. Apparently the longest strike in NHS history. I think it's 6 days, this one. What we're going to do about it all then? Who needs to blink first? Is it the junior doctors? Is it the government? All of these kind of pay restoration back to 2008. Is that reasonable? And are you still with them? One of the first emails I got tonight was from a viewer, Sue, saying, I am 100% behind the doctors, she says. Their wage, as they're paid right now, is disgraceful. She says even putting them up to £20 an hour as basic is not enough for the work that they do. Are you with Sue? Are you still backing them? Peter, where are you on it all?
Well, my main sentiment is that doctors should never go on strike, whatever their case is, whether it's good or bad, whatever the circumstances are. Doctors should not ever go on strike. If they wanted to go on strike, they should not have tried to become doctors. It's quite clear to me that if your trade is, or your profession is in the giving of mercy, that you can never withhold it. And to go on strike is to withhold mercy, and it's simply fundamentally, straightforwardly, unquestionably wrong. Therefore, I cannot support it. And whatever the case may be, I'm not interested. The strike is wrong, and that's that.
So how do they get their worth, then, financially?
Well, there are many, many ways of persuading people to pay you more, and actually very few people in their lives have ever been on strike. I've been a member of a trade union since I first started full-time work in 1973. I've been on strike during that period for 18 hours, and a futile waste of time it was, I have to say. It's not necessary to go on strike if you have intelligent leaders and intelligent people on the other side of the negotiating table. These things don't have to happen. Strikes. I was an industrial correspondent covering strikes for years and years of my life in the 1970s and early 1980s. Not one of those strikes was unavoidable. But in those cases, at least the people who went on strike were free to do so, because what they did was not so essential as mercy. Doctors simply should not go on strike, and the police also cannot go on strike. They're not allowed to. They're not particularly badly paid. And there was a lot of effort made in the time when I was an industrial correspondent to deal with the problem of firemen who had their pay had gone badly wrong, and they ended up being paid a lot better. And after that, it was even more unreasonable for them to strike. But they should really be in the category of people who shouldn't strike. I'm not saying people should be banned from striking. I hate banning people from doing anything. I just think it should be self-evident, if you were a doctor, that you don't go on strike. And if you don't want to be a doctor, don't be a doctor. But if you be a doctor, don't go on strike.
Aaron, do you agree?
Well, Peter said if you have intelligent leadership on one side and intelligent leadership on the other, then you don't need to strike. Of course, those are very big ifs.
Sure.
In a perfect world, I mean, I perhaps would agree, but we aren't in that world, sadly. And what I would say is that Rishi Sunak, when he became Prime Minister, had some big targets. Stopping boat crossings, inflation, interest rates, but also getting NHS waiting lists down. When he made that promise, when he outlined that target, he knew full well that junior doctors and people across the NHS would be going on industrial action, and that would be a problem for those targets. For waiting lists to come down, you need to basically pacify that part of the NHS workforce. You can agree or disagree with whether they're justified or not, but that's a prerequisite. And now what we're seeing is no real movement from the government. This is clearly going to make waiting lists longer. And I feel like the government is saying, oh, well, actually, look, we're not going to be able to get waiting lists down, but that's because the junior doctors are on strike. Well, we knew the industrial action was there in the first place. You made that pledge. You're not coming good on it. So...
Well, they offered an extra 3%, didn't they?
Yeah. I mean,
so there has been movement. And what the government is saying now, Victoria Atkins would say, well, actually, we're not going to get back around the negotiation table whilst you're on strike. So if you stop the strikes, we'll sit back down again. Well,
they've made that promise. And on inflation, their promise seems to be coming good. On small boats, not coming good. On NHS waiting lists, I think it also won't be coming good. So, look, it depends on how you read this. Politically, it makes total sense from my perspective for them to give the junior doctors what they want. They've probably got one more year left.
So you'd give them, what, 35%?
Well, no, I think in terms of the short term... So what they want is pay restoration to 2010 levels, but not all in one go.
It's 2008 levels, back to 2008.
Yeah, 2000...
It's about 35%, isn't it?
Yeah, it depends. I think it depends, but broadly that's correct. 25 to 35%, isn't it? Yeah. They don't want it all in one go. And the costings I've seen have been around £1 billion in terms of short term. Now, you might say, well, short term isn't good enough. From a political calculus point of view, Of course it is. You have a general election this year. What I find really interesting is that the Tories aren't going down that road, and I do think that's going to harm them at the general election. In a way, you might think, good, they're thinking about the long term. But I am surprised when you think about, for instance, what's happened with the RMT with the rail, for instance. We had no big rail strikes this winter. That's because the Tories knew a winter this year, like last year, would just look so bad for them electorally. I wonder why they're looking at this a little bit differently.
But, so, I mean, it's not just about pay either, is it? So pay, of course, is one of the big facets of this, but they also are talking about things like you've got these peer review bodies now, so they want to almost, I would say, summarise it by dismantling that and changing the way that those review bodies happen. They also want some kind of guarantees to protect against inflation going forward. And if you give in to this collection as a government, so you give this one particular collection, you know what, let's go back in time to 2008. Many of you, by the way, perhaps joined the profession since that point and were happy with your salary beyond that, but anyway, if you do that for the junior doctors, then the next time peer reviews come around for all the other segments, they're going to go, well, hang on a second, because now we want our pay restoring to X, Y and Z dates.
That's precisely what I'm not suggesting, though, because you're absolutely right. You create all sorts of problems elsewhere in the labour market. What I'm saying is it's more an observation, Michelle. In the short term, I'm just surprised that the Tories aren't just trying to settle down a little bit of a fire, because we have a general election this year. It is a surprise to me. You had two big parts of the labour market last year, rail workers and the NHS, on industrial action. It was causing them an electoral headache. It makes people feel the country isn't being run properly. That's expressed in opinion polling, 7 days a week, 365 days a year right now. And it's surprising to me they aren't trying to put this fire out purely as a matter of electoral expediency, if nothing else. I am surprised.
How much of this do you think is political?
Well, it must be political because it's a national health service and the government ultimately controls this. It could have, I don't speak for the government and wouldn't dream of trying to do so, but it could be that it crosses their mind that many members of the public will look at this and say, well, it's not the government that's causing the strike, it's the junior doctors, and their claim is outrageous. I couldn't demand a 35% pay rise. I can't get what I used to be paid in 2008. Why should they? And many of them will feel, as I do, that doctors in any case shouldn't strike. And it's a simple thing. It's one of those jobs where when you sign up to do it, you understand that striking is not an option. So why are they now resorting to this method of getting a pay increase, which, if they did get it, much of which would pretty much be swallowed up in inflation anyway. You can't reform the world by pay increases. It's something that people take time to learn, but it's undoubtedly true.
Adrian is making the point about hypocrisy. One of my viewers, he's saying that he thinks MPs have got a bit of an audacity when it comes to suppressing wage increases. Adrian's calculated it back. He's saying that they've had about a 40% pay increase, MPs. So he's saying that there's a double standard there.
I think that's right. And in addition to that, what Peter's saying, I think, misses a really crucial point, which is many of these junior doctors are leaving, health professionals are leaving the UK. We have a 45,000 shortfall on nurses, around 100,000 in the NHS, generally speaking. I remember a very good proposal from maybe one day PM Jubes, who was saying...
Careful what you wish for.
Who said, it was a very interesting proposal, which is to say that you won't pay tuition fees, you won't have student debt.
But you get locked in.
10 years, say, right? Or we can discuss numbers. I think 10 years seems reasonable. That seems very sensible to me. That's the kind of thing that I would like to see. I don't support tuition fees, student debt, and I understand that's a huge debate, but I think we have to start with these guys because they're so critical to how this country runs. And, of course, they have to give something in return, like promising to stay in the country and serving the NHS for 10 years.
But I've never understood why don't we lock in that personnel into things like the NHS? Why aren't you physically... If we're going to train you to be a part of our wonderful health service when it works... why aren't you have to be there? You're tied in via your contracts, whether it's via your loan repayments and some terms around that or whatever.
Well, I suppose it's because it's a free country and we haven't tended to resort to this kind of thing. We've tended to rely on people realising they've been given a benefit by getting this extremely valuable training and that as a result they have obligations. It's true, the fewer obligations people have, the more you have to force them to do things by making such rules. But I'd be very sorry if we became the kind of country which made that sort of rule.
Do you know, I'm just looking at you guys. I would say that there was a mixed bag in terms of who. I told you I started the programme with the viewer Sue, that was basically saying that she completely supports them. Lee says the junior doctors are disgraceful. They keep mentioning their basic rate of pay, essentially, is what he's saying. But of course, they get lots of top-ups and add-ons for working nights, bank holidays, weekends, or whatever it is. He says he regards them as spoilt brats. That's a bit harsh. Bridget says, I would have more respect for the strikes if they were holding the government to ransom over an overhaul of the service, but to demand just money for their job in the NHS. She says it's absolutely abhorrent. Why did they join the NHS if it wasn't to try and make things better for everybody? Again, echoed by Lorraine, saying that the junior doctors are not taking things out on the government, they're taking them out on us, the vulnerable, the sick, the frail, their patients. She says, I've lost respect for the junior doctors. They should not ever strike. Which side of the fence are you on? And where is your limit? Do you think that 35% or there or thereabouts is reasonable? And what would happen going forward to the other professions if that was indeed granted to the junior doctors? And how would we afford all of this?